spilled salt, most people laugh it off, or maybe pause for a second and think, is that bad luck? Some ignore it completely. Others feel a slight discomfort, but they don't know why. And then they move on. But what if I told you it's not about the salt at all? There was a time in my life when small, ordinary moments like this were never ignored, not because they were powerful on their own, but because of what people believed about them. When I was on the other side, we didn't focus on objects. We focused on interpretation, because interpretation shapes reaction, and reaction creates patterns. Now think about this. You spill salt. In that moment, nothing has actually changed. It's just salt on the ground. But if your mind immediately connects it to something negative, a shift happens internally, a subtle one. You become slightly uneasy, slightly distracted, slightly more aware of things going wrong, and from that moment, your attention changes. Now, this is where it becomes important, because once your attention shifts, your focus follows, and whatever your focus locks onto begins to feel more real. So if you expect something to go wrong, you start noticing everything that confirms that expectation. Not because something external changed, but because your awareness changed. And when I was on the other side, this is exactly what we understood. It was never about the object. It was about the reaction it triggered. Because if a small moment can influence your thinking, it can influence your entire day. So today, I'm going to show you what spilled salt really means. Not from superstition, not from fear, but from understanding how these moments affect your mindset, your focus, and your response. Because once you see it clearly, you stop reacting automatically and you start staying in control. And that changes everything. Now let's go deeper into what actually happens in that moment. Because spilling salt is not the issue. The real issue is the trigger it creates. When I was on the other side, we paid close attention to triggers like this, not because they had power on their own, but because they could shift someone's focus instantly. And once focus shifts, everything else follows. Think about it. Before that moment, your mind is neutral. You're moving through your day normally. Then something small happens. You spill salt. And if your mind connects it to something negative, even slightly, you pause. That pause is important because in that pause, your attention is no longer neutral. It becomes alert. Now you're watching, looking for signs, noticing small things, paying attention to what might go wrong. And this is where the shift begins, because your mind starts scanning for confirmation. Now here's what most people don't realize. When your attention is focused on something negative, you begin to notice more of it, not because it increased, but because your awareness is tuned to it, so a small inconvenience feels bigger, a delay feels more frustrating, a mistake feels more significant, and slowly your entire experience changes. Now, this is exactly how patterns begin, not through one big event, but through small shifts in attention. And once your attention is locked in a certain direction, your thoughts follow, your reactions follow, your behavior follows. Now let me make this clear. This doesn't mean something external is controlling you. It means your interpretation is guiding your response, and your response is shaping your experience. That's the key. Because once you understand this, you stop giving meaning to random moments. You stop allowing small triggers to control your focus. You recognize them for what they are, just events, nothing more. Now, here's why this matters. Because if you don't control your focus, anything can shift it. A comment, a delay, a small mistake. And once your focus is shifted repeatedly, it becomes a pattern. Now, in the next chapter, I'm going to show you why people give power to these moments in the first place, because this didn't start with you. It's something that has been passed down, repeated, and accepted without question. And once you understand that, you'll stop reacting to it completely. Now, here's where this really begins. Because the reaction you feel when something like spilled salt happens didn't start with you, it was learned, passed down, repeated, accepted over time without being questioned. When I was on the other side, this was something we understood clearly. People don't react to things because they are real. They react because they have been taught what to believe about them. Somewhere along the way, small events were given meaning. Spilled salt means something bad. A certain moment means something negative. A random occurrence becomes a sign. And once that idea is planted, it stays. Even if you don't fully believe it, it sits in the background of your mind. So when the moment happens, the reaction is automatic. You don't stop to question it. You just feel it. That slight discomfort, that brief hesitation, that quiet thought, what if? Now, this is important because belief does not have to be strong to influence you. It just has to be present. Even a small, unnoticed belief can shape your reaction, and your reaction shapes your focus. Now, here's what we observed. The more a belief is repeated, the more natural it feels. People stop questioning it. They stop analyzing it. They just accept it as part of reality. And once something feels normal, it becomes automatic. Now, this is how patterns are built. Not through logic, but through repetition. And once a pattern is established, it runs without effort. That's why someone can say, I don't really believe in that, but still react when it happens, because the belief is still there, quietly influencing them. Now, here's the shift you need to make. You don't just ignore the reaction, you question the belief behind it. You ask yourself, why does this moment feel like it means something? And when you do that, you start to see clearly. There is no real connection, no actual cause and effect. Just an idea that has been repeated enough times to feel real. And once you see that, the reaction loses its strength because you're no longer accepting it automatically. You're aware of it, and awareness breaks patterns. Now, in the next chapter, I'm going to show you how to respond in that exact moment, because awareness alone is not enough. You need a clear response that keeps you in control. Now that you understand the trigger and the belief behind it, this is where control comes back to you. Because awareness alone is not enough. You can recognize what's happening. You can understand why it's happening. But if you still react the same way in the moment, nothing changes. When I was on the other side, this was the exact point we relied on. Not whether someone understood something later, but whether they could respond differently in real time. Because the moment something happens, that's when the pattern either continues or breaks. So let's go back to the example. You spill salt. Immediately, there is a split second moment, a choice. You either follow the old reaction or you interrupt it. Now, here's the key. You don't ignore it passively. You respond intentionally. You say clearly, internally, this means nothing. I stay in control of my focus. Simple, direct, no emotion, no overthinking. Because what you're doing is not fighting the moment, you are removing the meaning attached to it. And once meaning is removed, the reaction has nothing to hold on to. Now, here's where most people get it wrong. They try to brush it off, but internally, they still feel unsure. They still think maybe it does mean something. And that small doubt keeps the pattern alive. So your response must be clear, not half committed, not uncertain, decisive, because clarity shuts the door completely. Now, after that, you move on immediately. You don't keep thinking about it. You don't keep checking your day for signs. You don't revisit the moment again and again, because revisiting reinforces it. Instead, you continue your day as if nothing happened, because in reality, nothing did. Now, when you do this consistently, something powerful happens. The reaction disappears, not slowly, but quickly, because you've removed the meaning that was feeding it. Now, instead of feeling uneasy, you stay neutral. Instead of watching for problems, you stay focused. Instead of reacting automatically, you stay in control. And that changes your entire experience. Because now, small moments no longer shift your attention. You decide where your focus goes. Now, in the next chapter, I'm going to show you how this applies beyond just spilled salt, because this pattern shows up in many different ways. And once you recognize it everywhere, you stop being influenced by it completely. Now, this is where everything expands, because this is not just about spilled salt. That was only an example, a small, visible moment. But the same pattern shows up in many different ways throughout your day, and most people don't recognize it. When I was on the other side, this was the real focus, not one specific trigger, but the system behind all of them. Because once you understand the system, you start seeing it everywhere. A small delay happens, and your mind immediately reacts. Someone says something, and your focus shifts. A plan doesn't go as expected, and you start questioning everything. Different situations, but the same pattern. Something happens, you assign meaning, your focus shifts, to your response changes. And once your response changes, your experience follows. Now, here's why this matters. Because if you don't see the pattern, you'll treat every situation as separate. You'll think, this is different. This time it actually means something. This situation is real. And in doing that, you keep reacting the same way. But once you recognize the pattern, everything becomes clear. You realize it's not about the situation, it's about how you interpret it. And that gives you control. Now, here's what we observed. People who didn't understand this were constantly reacting. Their focus was always shifting. Their thoughts were always changing. Their state was always influenced by what was happening around them. But people who understood this stayed stable, not because nothing happened to them, but because they didn't attach meaning automatically. They saw events as neutral, and because of that, their focus stayed consistent. Now think about how powerful that is. If your focus doesn't shift, your thoughts don't scatter. If your thoughts don't scatter, your actions stay aligned. And if your actions stay aligned, your results become consistent, all from one simple change, not reacting automatically. Now, this is where control becomes real, not controlling everything around you, but controlling how you respond to it. Because your response is what shapes everything that follows. And once that becomes your habit, you stop being influenced by small moments completely. Now, in the final chapter, I'm going to show you how to lock this in permanently, because understanding this once is not enough. You need to make it your default way of thinking. And once that happens, nothing random will ever control your focus again. Now, this is the final step, because understanding all of this is powerful. But if it doesn't become your default, you'll still find yourself reacting the old way in certain moments. Not because you want to, but because patterns repeat when they're not replaced. When I was on the other side, this is what we relied on most. Not whether someone learned something once, but whether they lived differently consistently. Because consistency is what turns awareness into control. So this final step is simple, but it requires intention. You train your mind to treat all random events as neutral. Not sometimes, not when it's easy, but every time something small happens, you don't pause in uncertainty. You don't search for hidden meaning. You don't allow your focus to shift automatically. You stay steady. Now, here's the shift. At first, you will have to remind yourself. You will catch reactions halfway through. You will notice your thoughts starting to drift. And in those moments, you correct them. Immediately, you say, "This does not control my focus," and you move on. Now, over time, something changes. You don't have to remind yourself anymore. You don't have to fight reactions because they stop appearing. Why? Because you've removed the belief behind them. And without belief, there is no reaction. Now your mind stays stable. Your focus stays consistent. Your attention goes where you choose, not where random moments try to pull it. And this is where real control begins. Because once your focus is unbreakable, your thoughts don't scatter, your actions don't become inconsistent, your direction doesn't change based on small events. You become steady. Now understand this clearly. This doesn't mean nothing will happen around you. Things will still go wrong sometimes. Unexpected moments will still appear, but they won't affect you the same way because you are no longer reacting automatically. You are choosing your response every time, and that choice becomes your strength. Now, let me say this clearly. You don't need to be perfect. You will have moments where you react first and realize later. That's normal. What matters is that you correct it quickly, because quick correction prevents the pattern from rebuilding. So don't focus on being perfect. Focus on being consistent, because consistency turns this into your default. And once this becomes your default, no small moment, no random event will ever control your focus again. You will remain clear, you will remain steady, and most importantly, you will remain in control.